especially for young people who are diagnosed with RAD, like some of the interventions are so harmful, right? Like therapists will be like, you should send them off to this wilderness camp. And that's, or like, you know, a
Rejected
group
again,
home or something. It's like,
abandoned again.
okay.
This is the Viva View, the podcast that redefines mental health. I'm your host, Dr. Julie Lopez, and every month we will be destigmatizing mental health with the help of an inspiring guest. Our goal is to empower you in your mental well-being. So let's begin. Welcome to the Viva View. I'm your host, Dr. Julie Lopez, and on this week's episode, we will be diving into the collection of experiences otherwise known as reactive attachment disorder and a different way of understanding it. Today, I'd like to welcome Haley Radke, who is a leader in the adoptee space and no stranger to what we adoptees struggle with in regards to relationships. She is an amazing podcaster herself, and she is the founder and producer of Adoptees On, a really amazing podcast that has certainly shaped my life and has informed and supported many, many of us other adoptees living out in the world. I personally experience Haley not only as having the most amazing God-gifted voice ever, but a real crusader in creating connection within our adopted community. Before we jump in, don't forget to check out our website, www.vivapartnership.com, for free and low-cost resources that will empower you in your healing journey. Thank you so much for joining us, Haley.
Honored. Thank you for that very generous introduction.
Absolutely. I've actually had the fun of being a guest on your podcast as well. So I have always appreciated the opportunities to speak with you and dive into important topics.
I think you've been on a couple of times, if I recall.
I have. It's been two
Yes.
or three, I think, over the years.
Yeah.
Amazing. So I wanted to ask you, we want to talk about reactive attachment disorder. And, my skin kind of bristles when I hear the word disorder anyway, because it feels like a label that just says, hey, you popped into the world this way, and there's really no hope for you to change it. That's what I hear. I know not everyone might hear that, but I hear that and I really don't like it because I've seen people make all kinds of incredible changes in their lives. And I wanted to ask you, in the position that you sit in, how often you see adopted people like you and I struggling with things around relationships.
So much. Like truly, that's one of, I think, our deepest challenges as adopted people. I've heard from so many people, whether it's romantic relationships or friendships, or their relationship with their adoptive parents is strained or estranged. It's so common. And I know it's a human experience too, but I just feel like we get the boatload.
Yes, we get the boatload. And so what's your sense of that when you've had, these, I don't even know how many interviews, hundreds of interviews, and I know that's brought you to stages and connecting within the community a ton. What's your sense of the why behind that? Why is that happening for us?
I think a lot of us feel like it's our fault. Like it's our fault. We're broken in some way. We just can't do it. We didn't learn how properly. Like there's just something wrong about us that we are rejected, rejected at birth from our people are supposed to take care of us and love us, passed off to strangers most often. And then what? Like there's something deeply wrong with us that we just cannot connect with other humans or struggle to connect with other humans. And that's such a hard place to be if that's your full identity. Like, how can you undo that then if it's something implicit within us that's wrong, that no one wants to attach to us.
Yeah. And I've seen that a lot also. And I definitely resonate with a tender spot or a hyper kind of sensitivity around being rejected or perceiving being rejected or cast aside. That makes sense, right? I think a part of this podcast in general is around looking a little deeper beyond labels and maybe being a little more curious about why someone might be presenting or coping or adapting in the way that they have. And you just laid out a whole bunch of things that are super, super hard, right?
When we're collecting that, right? If you believe those things about yourself, you're collecting evidence of that only,
You mean
which
you mean believe that about yourself, about you were mentioning being broken or being damaged or being like unworthy
or
of,
rejected. Like if I know I'm going into a relationship and I'm anticipating being rejected, then
yes.
any stimulus that's even neutral that I can possibly perceive as like, oh, they didn't text me back. Like, oh my God, what did I must have done something wrong. And like, I'm never going to hear from them again. You're collecting those things where it could be like, they're driving somewhere for 4 hours and they can't look at their phone right now, Like,
Yes.
oh,
Yes. Totally. So it's almost like what you're looking for, you end up seeing.
mhm.
So it keeps getting mirrored back to you. Okay, so let's imagine that for just a second. Like the thing that Haley just described, this collection of experiences, then looking for rejection. Totally understandable, right? Life shows you these really kind of traumatic interactions from early, early on. So we're adaptive, we're incredible. Humans have this amazing ability to find ways to cope and adapt. And so now, just like someone who's been in a fire is looking and sensitive to the smell of smoke, the sight of flames, right, is ready to run, that's adaptive. Right? People who might have had this type of experience would be scanning and looking for signs that something super hurtful is going to happen, more rejection. So let's step a little bit further and you jump into our standard mental health arena. And here comes the label because that person probably doesn't make relationships very easily, probably doesn't trust people very easily, maybe is a little bit on guard, or if they start feeling vulnerable, like they start feeling some type of attachment or some kind of care or connection, uh-oh, that in and of itself is a pretty big trigger. And so we start to look a little bit more at the way someone shows up when they catch a label, like reactive attachment disorder. I mean, that word disorder is so much, right?
I hate that term. I don't, Julie, I'm not a therapist. I don't even think it's a real thing. I really don't. I think this is an issue with adoption where children who are supposed to be with their biological parents, and then for whatever reason, they are removed and sent to strangers. And the strangers are not prepared for this new child. And so when you have professionals telling you, oh, your child has reactive attachment disorder, and these are the things we can do to fix them. There's no focus on how the parents can adapt their parenting and change those things. So, the whole way along for this adoptee, you're the issue, you're the problem, we got to fix you. And then they carry that into adulthood. And there's never like, well, actually, isn't adoption weird? Like, it's pretty weird that you got raised by strangers and you didn't get to stay with your biological parents. Like, that's weird. I think your reactions to this situation are pretty normal. Like, where am I? Like, I don't feel like I belong here. I hear from a lot of adoptees, like, these are the wrong hands that were touching me. Like I know my parents, my adoptive parents love me, but like my mother's hands, like it was the wrong hands, like there's these feelings like it's just like you don't feel quite in the right place.
You hit the nail right on the head, right? Systematically, sociologically, Why is the labeling falling on the person who's clearly showing signs of distress, right? And let's be clear, I just want to be super clear. Many, many people get slapped with that label of different types of attachment disorders, especially RAD. It's not just adopted people. It's just, I asked Haley on because a lot of adopted people get that label and it's really not taking in the bigger context. And you hit on something that I'm really passionate about, that I've dedicated my life to, which is understanding these deep unconscious maps that we have, right? It's called implicit memory, but when you come into the world, and this is supported by infant psychology and developmental psychology, you actually take in the world through your senses, sight, smell, sound, touch, taste, and these imprints are left there. And so when you're disconnected from what feels like kind of the space that you should be in because of your prenatal conditioning, it is hard. And so when you said, families, you called them strangers. They are strangers because the sensory data doesn't match what the infant has come to know. And then in our society, a lot of those families who are, struggling with infertility, have so much love to give, want to create a family, they aren't properly educated about the fact that a baby is coming in with some imprinting already, right? They're sold a bill of goods that's false. And so that's a whole other political conversation. But we're talking about the realities of labeling just feeling a little bit more convenient, right? It's not us, it's them. I think sometimes it's through lack of education, but we're trying to change that here. We're trying to have people who have experienced labels, who have been slapped on any kind of label. I mean, the last few episodes, we've talked about anxiety disorders, depressive disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder, all these things that have disorder on them that make you feel like, oh, I'm broken. It's done. What do we do? Nothing, right? There's nothing to do. Take some pills, hide away. And that's just not true. I've seen too many people that are able, through some of the advancements in neuropsychology, really change some of the mapping. And that's really the crux of the message, and that the labels are keeping people complacent and not searching for some of those resources that are out there, right? If you just say, oh, in this case, adopted person, RAD, never going to have good relationships, just kind of defective in this way, it's such a disservice to the person that's experienced these hardships in life that, of course, make them protective of connecting with people. And so I'm not surprised, but I'm glad to hear your skin bristles a little bit too when you hear that kind of stuff.
Like, pardon me. I think that's what's really special about the when adoptees come together and they share and they talk about these experiences. And so you're not alone and you're like, wait, maybe it's not me, maybe it's the circumstances that I was in and I didn't get the proper tools and supports that I needed. And so now, like, okay, our adoption happened a long time ago, and now we're grown ups and we got to deal with what we've been dealt with. Like we can't stay stuck. And so, what are we going to do to move forward with connection and building either relationships with fellow adoptees so we know we're not alone, and also to go out into the world and work on ourselves so that we can like have those deep romantic relationships if that's what you're looking for, or be a better parent to your child and solve those things that we maybe didn't get the perfect, nobody gets the perfect model, but you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I love even what you're saying, the picture you're painting. It opens up a lot more possibility. And this is why you're one of my sheroes, because you create those bridges all the time, right?
Mhm.
Someone who struggles with being alone can tune into your podcast, maybe not yet have done the personal work to maybe tolerate being in friendship or relationship with other adoptees yet, but they can get that through the podcast and hear real people coming on to tell real stories of hope and camaraderie. Yes, we're struggling with the same things. I love that transitive property. Oh, wait a second. maybe it's actually not me because that person sounds kind of awesome and they're struggling with the same things. It's so powerful. Yeah,
I just want people to know that they're loved and worthy of being loved, right? Because there's something about being given away. I mean, we can use whatever PC adoption language you like, but for especially for adoptees, there's something about being relinquished that just has this root in most of us. It's like we're not worthy of love or connection. And that's the proof because we were relinquished. And I know for a lot of people who aren't adopted, whatever messages they got, like if it was an unexpected pregnancy and your mother all along was like, "Oh my God, what am I going to do?" And it was like those messages get passed on. So there's always like these things that are implicit, as you taught me, that kind of rear their heads in adulthood.
that's totally right. And so, what have you seen over time in your work in community that has really helped people? And now we're talking about adoptees specifically. Start to open the window of hope. Oh, wait, maybe it truly isn't me. Maybe there were other more complicated circumstance, and there's a way for me to shift or change. Like, what are the types of things that you see really having an impact on that moment?
Well, one of them is what we've already mentioned is that community piece and like, yeah, listening to other people share their stories on my podcast or any adoptee story podcast. Then as they get to know more adoptees in community and people will talk about their, healing journeys like, oh, I found an adoptee therapist who gets me and I don't have to explain all the adoption trauma stuff to her. We can just get into it. Or people are often sharing like literally what type of therapy worked for them. If it's EMDR, I know you guys have all kinds of cool stuff that you're doing over there, like brain spotting or I don't know, I don't say anything else wrong, but
You've been right on time so far, but yeah, a lot of non-talk based therapy.
yes. Yeah. And now people are talking about using psychedelic assisted therapy to like get to some deeper roots, which can feel kind of scary. And I wouldn't say like that's your first stop, like not at all. That's a little bit later down the road, I think, for some people. So those kinds of things. And like as you start going to therapy, or you're just like reading more adoptee memoirs or anything like that, I think you see like I'm not the only person that has felt like this. There's literally thousands and thousands and thousands of people with this same
Unfortunately, it's
experience.
like hundreds of thousands or probably millions globally, right? We're connected.
Exactly.
It's just so much.
Exactly. And so when you're seeing those people unpack that ahead of you, you can see sort of the path forward. I think
Yeah.
I really feel like that. And I see, so there's the new adoptee consciousness model. There's all these adoptee researchers who are um, teaching us about ourselves, which is so great, and like evidence based things that you would know about for sure, Julie. And uh, it's giving hope, really. It's just giving hope, I think, to people who may have felt actually crazy. Like I was the only one. That's how I felt.
Yeah.
Like there's something wrong with me. Am
Yeah.
I crazy?
Yeah.
You
And
know?
this, of course, in a way, we have this benefit of this identity and all these pockets of community where we can step in online, in person, all kinds of things. But there are other people who have those same types of experiences where they feel alone or they feel crazy. And God forbid, although it happens all the time, they've been given a label, so they've given up because they're just have concluded, I'm just was born broken and maybe it's better if I'm not on the planet. Maybe there is no hope. And that is the biggest tragedy because there's actually so many ways to shift how we actually feel inside, right? So when with reactive attachment disorder, the collection of experiences are that as you get close to someone, you actually are reactive and push them away or threaten the relationship, or actually truly, like if you're a young person, like you scream and cry or you do something really destructive and they're like, oh, a reactive attachment disorder, can't trust, can't connect. And it does, it gives this message, it reinforces a message, certainly for adopted people, that you're defective, that you're broken. Because, of course, little kids, when we're little kids developmentally, we assume if something bad happens, it's our fault. Um, so it just really becomes a really bad spiral. And there are all these options. So yeah, that's really the vision around this podcast in general, which is giving people a different avenue to understanding how change is possible. And you've seen it, right? In your 8 years of podcasting, plus your life on the planet as the adopted person, is how powerful community can be in making those shifts and finding support and encouragement.
Absolutely. And one other thing I wanted to interject there is that, especially for young people who are diagnosed with RAD, like some of the interventions are so harmful, right? Like therapists will be like, you should send them off to this wilderness camp. And or like, a
Rejected
group
again,
home or something. It's like,
abandoned again.
okay. Let's just reinforce this message that it's you're the problem, and you need to exit our family to get solved before you can come back. Like, oh, my heart breaks for those folks because those messages are even deeper ingrained, right? So those patterns and like all the feelings and things, it's like the roads in your brain are just like paved instead of, just like a lighter gravel. So it's a little bit more work, I think, to undo some of that.
Of course it is. Of
Mhm.
course it is. And thanks for pointing that out. And I think it speaks to the bigger problem of relying so heavily on this book, this DSM book that has a whole bunch of labels, and it's political and it's financial. You have to give a label so that insurance will pay for
Right.
the service, and the label's reinforcing part of the problem. And
Mhm.
it just goes on and on. It's really a mess for people that are in the system, and maybe not having a bigger integrative and accurate picture on why and how someone adopted these particular types of behaviors to cope and to adapt to the world as it's presenting itself to them. I know you know this, but I would just like to share. I went out of my way in my book to share this at the end of each chapter. My book is not about adopted people, it's about implicit memory, this deep unconscious, but I shared a lot of adoptee statistics and adoptee stories just to raise awareness in the general public. And adopted people are grossly overrepresented in residential treatment, overrepresented in suicide statistics, overrepresented in substance use treatment programs. And it's no wonder, you start out with a bang and then it keeps getting reinforced. And suddenly we have really, really big struggles because the coping tools and the adaptations are getting labeled incorrectly. And you're pointing out something that's so important, which is actually the environment and the community's approach to what is and has been a really hard experience to go through. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, what are your thoughts in general? I know you've talked about community and you've also talked about a little bit more curiosity about the dynamics of the way that society or community is labeling what they see. How would you put it into your own words around what an adopted person might actually be experiencing, or a different way of looking at it when they're given that label, reactive attachment disorder?
I think it probably feels like a confirmation of like what I believed about myself, that I'm not lovable and not worthy, is true.
when they get the label.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's so, it's the literal opposite of what we would hope for adopted children and adults. Like, no.
Yes.
Like,
Tell me more about that. The no, when you go, no, like what is more accurate?
you're so worthy and loved. I mean, just because you're a human on this planet, like you're worth being here. Life wanted you here, as Gabor Mate has said to adoptees, life wanted life and life wanted you here. And so just, just the talking about reactive attachment disorder, it makes me so angry
Mhm.
because it has just reinforced this sense of brokenness
Yeah.
in so many of us that even if you didn't get that label, if you're an adopted person and you're online and you're seeing some of the ways adopted parents talk about their children, or you're seeing adopted children being rehomed elsewhere, it is reinforcing that belief in us that we're just not worthy and we're unlovable. And I just don't believe that. I love adoptees too. I've this is my job now. Like I just love adoptees and I want them to know they're not alone.
Yeah.
And so that's my whole purpose in life. That's my okay, number three, because I have children and a lovely husband and so I'm taking care of them. But then it's like my number three.
That's
And
so
so I would love to burn RID to the ground. I never want to hear about it again. It's BS. And it's so disappointing that even members of our own community are still teaching that to adoptive parents today. And I don't know why. I mean, I do know why. It makes the adoptive parents feel better about themselves. Like, oh, it's not us, it's them.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I could feel that. And I so appreciate the love message. And I love the quote of Gabor's. He was one of the people who endorsed my book, which I'm very appreciative of. And yeah, life wanted you here. I love it. I would also add, I'd love to turn RAD into a different acronym. I don't have the D yet, but like radical adaptation and something amazing, because the way I look at it, whether it's an adopted person or not, when someone's showing up that way, oh, and this is a Gabor quote, he would say, not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you. And so, yeah, you're testing people. You're checking to make sure things are safe. You don't want to be hurt again. That is adaptive. And I would love the story to be, oh, you're showing up this way. Let's take a deeper look at the ways life has disappointed you, at the ways you've been hurt by people, right? Sometimes people are hurt by natural disasters, things like that. But when we're hurt by other people, it is actually adaptive to put cushioning around yourself, to create distance, to be careful about who you connect with. And so I personally think adoptees are heroes and they are fighters and they have tenacity and they take a bunch of crap cards and they figure out how to put one foot in front of the other. So when I hear about someone who's gotten that label, I imagine that on their own, they have come up with some type of schema to keep themselves safe, to figure out how to deal with life on life's terms as they understand them. And they've put something together that works for them, or it works enough to keep doing it, to keep them safe. And when, and if
And
I
keep
get
them
called,
alive.
oh, go ahead, to
Keep
keep
them
them alive.
alive.
Yep, to keep them alive. And all that I want to proselytize is that there's something better, that this isn't the only way to be safe, and that there are other ways to rework some of the wounds in our deeper nervous system and to talk, not with talk, but with the language of implicit memory, which is sensations instead of words, that you can actually shift the alarm bells that go off in your body. So that's the way I would love for people to think about or get curious about someone, anyone, adoptee or not, that has that kind of label. Like, hold on a second, because it really changes. I've seen this so many times with clients that I've worked with. When we reframe the way they're understanding their collection of experiences, into something of a hero's journey where our bodies are built to cope and adapt. And let's look at this adaptation a little more closely. And let's figure out how we might be able to find a present day, which now it's 2024, way of working with life on life's terms without dragging in the adaptations that you had to use that may now be outdated. But let's not damn you for finding those and figuring those out. You're brilliant. You're crafty, you're clever to kind of figure out how to do this thing because the stats are against us, right? There's many, many of us that don't make it to the next day because it just feels too overwhelming. And like you said, if it just keeps getting reinforced, whether it's with labels or actions like being shipped away, if your core wound is being relinquished, maybe that's not the first thing you want to step to in terms of an intervention with someone who's struggling with relationships. And that was such
Right. And
a good point.
just the fact that oh, you, there's nothing wrong with you. All of these reactions, just like you said, Julie, like these are serving a purpose and they're the natural response to the circumstances you were in. Like
Yes.
your kids are smart. There's no bad kids. No bad kids, right? Just like Dr. Becky Kennedy says. And the circumstances, however, may have needed shifting. So
And that's why I think your medium with your podcast is so powerful. Can we do a little shout out for your 8-year anniversary and how many downloads? It's a lot.
I think I'm at like something like over 1.4 million now, which is pretty cool.
I mean,
Yeah.
that is such a powerful tool for connection.
Yeah.
And I know it's facilitated some really important connections across the globe. So I'm just so grateful for you for coming in here today and helping talk a little bit about something that makes us both mad. Adoptees On, guys. It's Haley's podcast. If you want to know more about the adoptee experience and or you're an adopted person looking to connect with others and be curious, a little curious about some of the things that we're facing in day-to-day life, this is the place to be. Plus, I'll just say it again, I love your voice. You were made for it, girl.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. And yes, like if you're an adoptee and you have felt alone or like you haven't met anyone else that gets you, like please come and listen. You will feel supported and connected. And we have so many adoptee therapists that come on for our healing series, like Dr. Julie. And they're just the wisdom that you get from these people is just incredible. Like you get incredible access. You can feel like you're in the room with them. Podcasting's the best. Like, I hope you fall in love with it like I have.
I hope I get to where you are. 1.4 million. Let's just say it out loud.
Let's go.
Oh, amazing. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed our deep dive into reactive attachment disorder. Down with the label, boo. Be sure to check out Haley Radke's amazing podcast, Adoptees On, and join us next month when we'll continue talking about how to redefine mental health. As always, please visit us at www.vivapartnership.com to access our amazing free and low-cost resources that will empower you on your healing journey. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support the podcast, please share, subscribe, and leave a rating and review. Let's redefine mental health together.